Does Burn the Witch live up to the legacy of Kubo's previous work, Bleach, and can it stand on its own merits? That is what we're going to attempt to determine today, going over the chapters that have been released so far. Hello ladies and gentlemen, my name is Anonymous Weeb, but you may refer to me as Weebs if you prefer. I have read the Bleach manga from start to finish and can say with some confidence that this story has the potential to be a grand successor. But before we get into the serious meat of video, let me remind you that if you want to keep up to date with any videos that I put out, remember to press that subscribe button and ring that notification bell. Okay, with that out of the way, let's get into this. I'll be splitting this video down into a couple of sections, those being story so far, concepts, design, future plot developments, and final thoughts. The story of Burn the Witch is set in England, and in London to be more specific. And in this story there exist beings known as dragons, supernatural creatures, which a large portion of the population can't see. In the distant past, those that could see them moved to a place known as Reverse London, a sort of mirrored world, like a reflection in the water. To control and maintain the dragon population, an organisation known as Wingbind was created. Those who work for Wingbind are known as witches and wizards. Witches and wizards are the only ones allowed to come into direct contact with dragons without being imprisoned for 100 years or receiving the death penalty. Those that come into physical contact with a dragon for a long enough period of time become what is known as dragonclad, a sort of mixture between dragon and human. This is where our main characters come into play. Noelle Nihashi is a high school student in the regular London who is constantly being bothered by her fellow student Balgo, a perverted young man who asks to see her panties and uses his pet dog, Sushi, in a way to distract her. She is swift to dispatch him before entering into a phone box, which takes her into Reverse London to meet up with her partner, Nini. The pair of them go out to help with the harvesting of a dragon, as they are both parts of the Piper unit of Wingbind, which is responsible for such activities. While at the same time Balgo is chatting with his childhood friend about how Noelle just disappeared before his very eyes, which his friend obviously doesn't believe, which results in them heading back to the phone booth to see if they could find anything. Right before they can head back home, something seems to attack Sushi, that something being what looks to be a large black dragon, sending Balgo flying. The scene then transitions to Noelle and Nini harvesting the dragon that they were told to, before they get called up by their chief, telling them that a dark dragon has appeared and must be eliminated. Dark dragons are dragons that have come into contact with regular humans and have absorbed their negative feelings, gaining a higher level of intelligence. Because of the fact that Noelle has a direct link to the location through the magical coin she used to enter into the Reverse London, and the fact that all members of Sabers, the unit responsible for dealing with dark dragons, was aware at the moment they were called in. When they arrive, they are taken off guard as the dragon turns to them and demands to see Noelle's panties, causing her to turn bright red and start yelling for Balgo to come out, while freaking out about how the penalties of touching a dragon. Before Balgo and his friend are able to leave, Nini goes after them, only for Balgo's friend to turn out to be something called a disguiser dragon, who takes dead bodies and wears them to imitate the creature that they once were. Noelle explains that it was likely Balgo's friend died 10 years ago when they both got hit by a train, and Sushi turned out to be also a dragon disguise. The two witches attempt to engage the dragon, with Nini being smacked into the ground near a stunned Balgo. Before the dragon can attempt to eat Nini, Balgo moves in the way and takes the blow instead. This allows him to see the dragon, which has been pretending to be his friend for the last 10 years. There is a moment between Balgo and the dragon where you have the typical shonen friendship stuff, only for it to not work, and Noelle to just end up killing it in one shot instead. There's a sort of time jump as they end up back at the Wingbind base, where they find out Balgo is now classified as dragonclad, meaning that he is under the protection of Wingbind, and most importantly, he is under the protection of Noelle and Nini, much to their dismay. That's where the one-shot ends, with Sushi, who is apparently still with Balgo at this point, asking to see Noelle's panties, Balgo running away, and Noelle chasing after him, as we find out this all takes place in the western branch of the Soul Society. Following on from this, the first official manga chapter of Burn the Witch starts a month after these events, and we find out that Nini is part of an all-girls band, and she was apparently had a boyfriend called TJ, but they broke up recently. She ends up getting followed by a growing group of fans, asking her questions until she runs around a corner and uses her magic coin that we saw in the one-shot to teleport herself to Reverse London by having the floor open up underneath her. We get an internal monologue about how she doesn't like fairy tales and how she feels that only idiots get bewitched, so she'd rather be the one casting the spells instead. Then we transition to Noelle chasing down what looks to be a winged deer sort of dragon, while riding on her own. Using a sort of horn/gun, she uses it to cast a spell to try and subdue it. Apparently the flowers on its antlers react to magic and start to bloom. Just at that moment another dragon appears, this one looking like a large bird creature, which Noelle hits with a spell, causing it to turn and flee. Its wings, however, create a powerful gust of wind which blow Noelle and the dragon, which is now revealed to be a budbug, away, only for Ninny to come in at the last moment, casting a spell to create a sort of magical net to catch them to prevent them from being harmed. Ninny attempts to tell off Noelle for risking the dragon's well-being because it has such a high harvest rating, only for Noelle to remind her that she's super late. They have a small argument about Noelle addressing Ninny by her first name, despite being of her senior, and Noelle complains slightly about how being called Niha instead of her actual first name. We get a basic retelling of the history of dragons that we got in the one-shot before transitioning to the base of operations for Wingbind. Ninny starts to complain at Noelle for taking a two-person job by herself, and Noelle responds she'd rather bluntly it's because Ninny was late, before revealing she would also go after the job because she wanted the entire reward for herself. We then see that money can be transferred between Reverse London and Front London, as they call it. Alongside this, we also reveal that there is something known as achievement points, something that can be earned by witches and wizards. Noelle has lost some points because she picked the flower on the budbug's antler. Ninny, on the other hand, has earned herself some points for her save at the end, protecting what she calls the commissioned goods in the form of the budbug. She yells at Noelle for picking off the budbug's flower without permission. Noelle responds that they lose their value if they flower before sale, so she was helping out their client, before going on to tease Ninny about how pretty the flower is and how she can touch it but not have it. The explosion goes off in the distance and we get to see Balgo holding onto a leash around Sushi's neck as the dog has grown wings and is flying around the city with him holding on for dear life. Neither Noelle nor Ninny are interested in helping him until their previous chief, who got promoted in the one-shot and then demoted back down again in this chapter, tells them that they have to go help him or he will get himself killed. They honestly don't seem that fussed about it, considering they aren't getting paid overtime for this or getting any achievement points for watching him all day, only for the chief to reveal that he's got the approval of overtime and bonus points for them from the relevant people. This spurs the two of them into going after Balgo to make sure he's alright, with Ninny declaring that Noelle's in it for the money and she's doing it for the points flying off, announcing that if anybody asks, they're doing it for social justice, leaving the chief behind, staring at them with a deadpan expression. The story then transitions to Sushi crashing into a person's window. Said person, apparently knowing Balgo at this point, is less afraid about the injuries and more afraid about coming into contact with a dragon. It's once again explained that civilians aren't allowed to come into contact with these dragons, and only those who've passed a certain test can become licensed witch and wizards of Wingbind. At that moment, Noelle and Ninny show up, the latter grabbing Balgo and the former grabbing Sushi before they can crash into the ground, with Balgo having a sort of comedic scene thanking Noelle for saving him when it was in fact Ninny. While Noelle is trying to calm the dragon dog down, Ninny is demanding to know what Balgo did to cause Sushi to go out of control like that. Before they can resolve anything, however, the person that had their window broken yells at Balgo. Noelle flies up to them and she informs them that they can use the dragon insurance to cover the cost of their window, and asks if they came into contact with the dragon. Ninny tells us to do a test, which is shown to involve the person looking the mobile phone. We then get a bit of background on the laws to do with humans not interacting with dragons came into existence. We also learn that those who interact with dragons without proper qualifications gain something called dragon toxin in their body, which when it reaches a certain point, the person becomes dragon-clad, just like Balgo. He starts to wail on Balgo for causing him so much trouble and demanding to know why he didn't put a fence collar on Sushi, because as a dragon-clad he is the only one, not a witch or wizard, that can touch him. Balgo attempts to calm her down, telling her that he did put it on, only for it to fall off, and it sprouted wings and they were out for a walk. Noelle comes down and starts to question him about what might have caused Sushi to have such a reaction. A bit more background is filled in about what it means to be a dragon-clad, and the major symptom of being a dragon-clad is attracting more dragons, Right as Nini is asking him if it's because he was in danger, another dragon attacks them from behind, and she has to pull him out of the way. Noelle tells Nini to put up some barrier tape, which she does with the words written on it, "Keep out" and "Witches and Wizards only." Noelle then proceeds to hit it with a stunning spell, causing Nini to stare at her in shock. As the dragon crashes back into the building, Nini yells at her for asking to put up a barrier when she was just going to knock it out, to which Noelle responds it was just for precautionary measure, before ringing up the boss asking for an additional reward, saying that they didn't know that it was a dragon, what the dragon type was. Cue right at that moment its face sliding off to reveal it's a dark dragon, and Nini having to leap in to save Noelle before it can crash into her, only for it to crash into a fire hydrant, resulting in them both becoming soaked. The pair of them get on their own dragons and fly out of the way, while Nini calls out for the chief, telling them to put up a dragon blockade. At that very moment, fences begin to rise up around the area, with a loudspeaker beginning to announce from Reverse London BBC that a dark dragon is attacking. Noelle tries to call in for Sabers, the group, to come deal with the dark dragon, but Nini cuts off the call, stating that this is their chance to show to the higher-ups just how powerful they are, before flying off to deal with the dark dragon. Noelle isn't really bothered about it, however, and doesn't feel like she has to show off her strength, because she's only interested in harvesting dragons and taking them to their pastures. As Nini is flying towards the dark dragon, we learn that normal dragons won't attack humans unless severely hungry, but dark dragons have a sort of fascination with humans, and will actively seek to do them harm or even kill them, and the only way to deal with them is to have them eliminated. As Nini is flying around the dragon, Noelle takes out her horn gun thing and prepares a spell that creates a large magic ring around her with 5 points coming out of it, facing upwards towards the dark dragon. We don't actually get to see the effect of this spell, as the scene transitions to Wingbind's supreme powers that be, top of the horns. We get introduced to 7 of the 8 corpse leaders, discussing the fact that it's been almost a century since the dark dragon got into Reverse London. They come to the conclusion that Balga should never have been allowed to let loose in the city, and that he must be eliminated as he's a dragonclad, so that he can't cause any more trouble. And that's how the first proper chapter of Burn the Witch ends. I have to say, Kubo, this is one of the few mangaka I know that would introduce so many seemingly important characters and concepts to us at once. Most people would rather introduce us slowly, lead us into the world, rather than just throwing us in at the deep end. But I have to say I like it. Moving on to the concepts, such as Reverse London. The idea of Reverse London is interesting because rather than being a section of the Serite, it seems to be connected to the living world, as in a natural reflection of it. It reminds me less of a separate dimension, and more like the Vandenrijk, which was created from the shadow of the Serite, hiding in its shadows. It makes me wonder if Reverse London was built in a similar way, and perhaps we might get more information about how exactly a dimension like this is created using spiritual energy. There's also the possibility that what happens in London might actively affect what happens in Reverse London, because the two of them are definitely connected in some manner. All I can say is I'm interested to see how Kubo will tie this into the Bleach lore. Maybe the Western branch was from a splinter group which wasn't welcome in the Serite, so they created their own unit in the human world. Dragons. I'm glad that Kubo is finally delving into these mysterious creatures which were mostly ignored within Bleach. Creatures like Komamura and his clan of beastmen, and Yoruichi's crab transformation. These dragons could be the missing link which would explain the abnormalities, and I like that Kubo's putting these at the core of his story, not just as an enemy to be replaced by bigger and smarter things later, but as a functional part of their economy. How cool would it be to find out that Yoruichi was actually dragon-clad the entire time, and that the reason she possessed the ability to turn into a monster cat was because of her interaction with these dragons, and being affected by either dragon toxin, or that somewhere back in Komamura's lineage there was a dragon-clad, or an actual dragon. Going further, maybe the beast realm is where the dragons originate from. I'm just throwing around wild speculation, so I won't delve any more into that headcanon, so let's just move on. Dragonclads remind me a bit of Fullbringers coming into existence, both coming into existence by having a supernatural being of some capacity come into contact with them. I always wondered if people would become affected by hollows being around them for extended periods of time because of their powerful spiritual energy. I, however, am curious about what other effects being dragonclad might have on a person, other than just having them attract dragons. I don't think that would be the only effect, because it seems a bit lackluster for a death sentence. But we will have to wait and see what Kubo decides to do with it. Witches and Wizards. In Bleach, I always thought there was a terrible lack of Kido used by the Shinigami, and I always felt that it could be a great potential, not to overtake the use of Zanpakuto as the main source of offense, but to significantly supplement their fighting styles. Witches and wizards of Wingbind seem to be human who explicitly use spells for offense as well as utility, making them closer to Kido Corps than the 13 Gatsu squad from Bleach. However, their magic seems to work under the same principle as the magic from Bleach, having numbers and chance, but at the same time, I get the feeling that it's a lot more modern and advanced. Referring to the fact that Shinigami seem to be stuck in tradition, and following a strict set of rules limits the amount of flexibility in development, I feel that there will be a lot more variation between the spells used by individuals in the world due to the more flexible environment. But circling back to the fact that they are human, or at least they spend a lot of time in the human world, to create identities, makes me curious about what sort of tests they undergo, because it's obviously something that marks them different from regular humans. Maybe higher spiritual pressure, maybe a resistance to dragon toxin? Whatever it is, it does bring up the question, if somebody is randomly born with the ability to see dragons, how do they get in contact with people like Wingbind? Or do they just live out their lives constantly seeing monsters everywhere? Or maybe the research and development section has a scanner for people like that. Moving on to the character designs, Noelle makes me think of a female Byakuya mixed with Orihime. The face of a female Byakuya and the curvaceous form of an Orihime. Her facial expressions are a lot more expressive when compared to Byakuya, willing to deadpan and blush significantly when embarrassed. As for her uniform, it's not anything special as far as I'm concerned, just a schoolgirl uniform with a shoulder cape, which does add something to it, but it doesn't make me enough to stand out or seem above average in terms of design. The only thing that catches my eye is that little horn extension on the side of her hair. Wonder if that's going to play any significance in this story. Overall, her design is pretty, she's cute, but nothing special when compared to other characters Kubo has created over the years, but I like it. Nini's design alone tells you a bit about her character, that she's confident and not willing to let herself be walked over. Her design is a lot more striking than her partner Noelle's in my opinion. It's not just a schoolgirl uniform, which is incredibly common in anime, but she combines it with thigh highs, leather boots, and what resembled either short shorts or booty shorts, which give her outfit a bit more to stand out with. Overall, however, I think, like Noelle's, it's not really a design which stands out as anything particularly special compared to some other character designs. Not bad, just nothing special. There honestly isn't anything special about Balgo's design. If you put him in a room with a bunch of generic MCs, you wouldn't be able to pick him out at all. We don't get to see full body design of Wingbind's leaders, but those that stand out to me are Thronbone tacking the head of Piper's, where the two main characters are currently. He makes me think of a gnome, short and kind, with a grandfatherly face. The other is Wolfgang. He reminds me of a mix between an angry Yamamoto and old man Zangetsu, with his shades, or Yawach. The others just look generic humans, but who knows, we only got less than a full page of each, so we'll just have to wait and see how the designs look in full view later. So with those out of the way, let's move on to future plot developments. One thing that is most interesting to me is what does it mean to be dragonclad? Because overall, the exposure to dragons and their toxin isn't seeming to have any negative effect on Balgo other than attracting dragons to him, which doesn't seem like a truly difficult thing to deal with if you just put him in a secure location. So I foresee there being other issues with being dragonclad. I can't say what they might be, but when they introduced the head of the research division, I can see they was finding out a lot more about it. And speaking about the head of the research division, they might end up being involved with the group, as being able to touch a dragon is forbidden. The chance to study an actual dragonclad would be quite rare and invaluable experience for a person involved in scientific fields. Nini's ambition to join Sabers is something that I can see going on for a long time if the series decides it wants to go down that route. But if its series only wants to stay to a few short chapters, I can see Nini having a tearful goodbye as she leaves Piper's, saying goodbye to Balgo and Noelle on the 4th chapter, only for them to show up at Sabers and say they're coming along too, causing her to face fault. And Balgo proving his worth, because this needs to be addressed, because there's no way that Noelle and Nini by themselves will be able to fight off against the entire army of Wingbind, unless he can make use of himself. Perhaps he can turn dark dragons back into regular dragons. I would certainly make keeping him around worth it. If I was going to sum up my final thoughts in a single paragraph, it would be this story so far has a great amount of potential to go in different directions, have some interesting character growth, along with plot development and world building in the Bleach universe. But we haven't done anything to wow the pants off me yet, and I know it's only been 2 chapters, one officially, but I feel like this was going to keep people invested in the series right now, is the fact that it's set in the Bleach universe, and the hook of Balrog being eliminated at the end of chapter 1. The characters don't seem to have a specific aim in mind. Well, Nini wants to join Sabers, but we don't know why she is so determined to join them. I feel like over the next few chapters we should get some character motivation to really suck some people into the series. But overall, the plot is moving at a decent pace, and we have already formed a group of antagonists and a central issue. So that'll be it for me. Don't forget to hit that like button, press the subscribe button, ring the notification bell if you enjoyed this, and leave a comment down below if you made it to this point telling me what you think of the series. See you next time. Weebs out.